Hi, I'm Dr. Jaime Module. Welcome to Module 8, Triggers and Planning for Them. This is part of the course. If you want to fly higher, you must be lighter. And the image behind me is not light. It's heavy and it's deadly. It can be something that is unpredictable. And that really addresses triggers. These are things that are ready to go off at any point. I mean, trigger, think of the gun, as soon as the trigger moves, then there's a often deadly consequence to it or a destructive consequence to it. So it's really a good term to describe the way that we can have reactions that are often hard for us and other people to deal with. And sometimes can be really destructing and life-ending even. You can think of movies like Zoolander. It was kind of silly where somebody hypnotized this guy and put this cue in his mind so that when he heard a certain song, I believe, then he was going to go out and kill somebody. Or Inception. That's one where people would go again and plant an idea deep in a person's subconscious that then would come forward. It would be triggered and they would carry out some action. So we can think about that kind of planting something, a seed in someone's mind in dramatic ways, in kind of more mysterious, interesting ways. And often those are ways that we've also internalized these cues, internalized ways that we're going to react when we have anything go on. When we see something, when we hear something, when we smell something, when we feel something. All of our senses can be ways that we get reminded of a past buried trauma, a past buried harm to us, without us knowing it. And so we've talked a little bit about how there's a lot in our self that we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. Another way of thinking about this is something called the Johari window. And the Johari window is named for, as far as I know, two people, one named Joe, one named Harry. It seems silly, but they got to name it because they came up with it. And it's a way to organize or think about consciousness and what's not conscious for us. And so it's organized by conscious up on top and unconscious or subconscious at the bottom. And then to one side, things that are obvious to other people, and then on the other side, things that are not obvious to other people. And so in the bottom left, we have stuff that is blind to us. And again, Mark Twain has this idea, no way to tell why a man can't hear himself snore. We don't know everything about ourselves. They don't have to be bad things, but it's just part of our consciousness, unconscious. We don't know. Other people may notice it. Other people may recognize, habits or weird behaviors or things like that we don't. Been in a marriage relationship for a long time, and my wife has said for years, "Why do you do that?" And I think, "You're nuts. I don't do that." And then at some point, I catch myself years later, and that's where it becomes more hidden. It's somebody else notices it, and I kind of notice it myself. It takes time. We don't know all the stuff about ourselves. The next quadrant over is hidden. So in support groups, in networking, in coaching, there'll all be ways that we hear other people's experiences and we can think, oh yeah, that relates to me too, or I do that too. That can be very valuable and useful. Then when we are more conscious of those things, those can be brought into a private knowledge. So that's the upper left. And it's not obvious to other people what we know and what we can do until we share that, and then becomes public. And so this process takes place of learning more about ourselves in safe environments over time in relationship. I mention this because triggers can happen in different areas of consciousness. We can be blindsided by something that happens to us. A trigger, we were reminded of something, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden we may be filled with rage or fear or anxiety and so on. A trigger, in that case, that's often the victim experience. I think often in the survivor experience, we're aware that there's some background that is troubling for us. If we're aware of our abuse, we're aware of the more details. Some people are aware of it their whole lives, other people don't remember, and over time start to recognize more and more. And so survivors can often kind of have a trigger go off and have it be confusing, because we're functioning or we're surviving life And still these things are going on that get in the way of our relationships, that get in the way of how we work with other people, that get in the way of our self-care. And triggers can also happen when a person has done some more recovery as a survivor-thriver, a person taking care of himself. But it's different. When a trigger happens, in my experience, as I see others experience as well in that place, people can recognize it and manage it and then move forward. And it doesn't have to be a huge public experience. Although thrivers, I would say, can make their experiences, even in the moment or just in general, more public, more useful for other people. And so this module is about managing triggers. And if we've been blindsided or we've been real confused about triggers, I want to offer you a few steps, a few things that you can do to plan to manage them very differently. And so if it's not clear, triggers are cues that link to memories and they result in some kind of reaction for us, whatever it is. And some people may have happy triggers, right? When we have memories and we smell something baking, maybe we have a happy memory. Real estate people, when they show people homes, will bake something so that people come into the home and have this nice connection. Oh, this is a good place, a good feeling. Celebrations, anniversaries are often triggers of happy things. Sometimes triggers of death or destruction and so on, as we've seen nationally through 911 and other kind of national memorials, trigger all kinds of memories. So if we've lost someone, that anniversary is going to come back to us, on that kind of chronological calendar trigger. So triggers happen all over the place. And they're usually unconscious. So the more we're conscious of them, the more we can do with them. And this has a lot to do with what we just talked about in self-sabotaging. That we may not get why someone is making progress or they're starting to take control of their lives, take responsibility for their lives, and then something happens and they're back to using, or they're back to drinking, or they're back to whatever destructive behavior that they were working away from. So triggers happen. And they do happen throughout our lives. We're always going to see, smell, touch, taste, hear things that are associated with past memories, whether they're positive or negative. And so, again, with this course, when I fly higher, must be lighter. We're going to be lighter from these memories that are haunting, lighter from these toxic memories, because we'll find ways to acknowledge them, find ways to be less reactive and more observant of them, and then even find ways to be more creative with them. So, survivors often experience triggers and have these reactions of flashbacks, anxiety attacks, nightmares, just being nervous around being other people or being touched, anticipating bad things, having emotional swings and being angry. And this certainly happened to me at different times when I was in the middle of teaching and I was dealing with all kinds of now evolving, emerging memories. And I would suddenly feel anxious, or I would suddenly feel really angry at someone who reminded me of the abuser. And so these are things that we're not often conscious of, but they happen. So here's a plan. To recognize, first of all, that we have them, and then to think for ourselves how we can manage them, and then to share with others so we have a support network and work through them. And it may seem mechanical at first, but that's all right. Just like learning a language, just like learning a new skill, at first it may seem kind of mechanical, but it's a starting point. And you'll find more and more ways to prepare for, to intervene, or even prevent a lot of triggers. But recognize that it's just part of our general recovery, and it's also part of life. Life is difficult, so these are ways that we want to take care of ourselves. So first of all, I want to say we need to commit to our own healing and commit to our own recovery, that we are worth recovering. We are worth being healthy and happy and whole. And so with that starting point, we can do some work. And we may have some ambivalence around that. Are we really worth it? Am I as special, as some people have told me? Because in the past, when people have told me I was special, maybe that led to abuse or being used or exploited. So that's the first part. Even if we're a bit ambivalent, we recognize that, but we need to commit to, I'm going to be healthy anyway. I'm going to push, and I am going to have something different. For those who have taken on a big challenge, like a marathon, I don't know, or a half marathon. I ran a half marathon, my first one, not too long ago. So it's a recent example. And it took me 6 months to prepare for that, because I didn't ever think I would want to do that, let alone complete it and have fun. So whatever goal we have is going to take some time. We talked in the first Module 6 about the garden. If that's what we want to have, then we want to recognize the glacier behind us, that we have to recognize that there may be some things that may fall apart, that they may surprise us, may get in the way. So commit, recognize that there's going to be a process, we may slip, we're going to have to make some choices, and let's begin. So imagine, and there'll be workbook activities for this and opportunities to chat. Imagine, though, what you're like when you're well, what you're like when you're really happy. And so we won't list that and give you time right now to really write that through, but that's something that you need to begin with. How do you feel? What is in place for you? The people, maybe the places, the experiences, the thinking. How are you most you? And we have a sense of that as a starting point, as a barometer. That's critical. That's a benchmark for us, because then we can gauge when we're losing that, when we're out of touch with that. And so, first of all, imagine, when I'm well, how do I feel? What's going on? And then what helps? Another list. When I'm feeling uncomfortable, when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm insecure, when I'm starting to get into some negative thinking, what helps? And it might be simple things. Physical things are always good. Cup of tea, taking a walk, talking to a friend, reading, doing different things that engage our body, engage our mind, engage emotionally. Maybe for some people, it's some kind of snack or comfort food. Maybe it's rest. For me, it's doing a lot of things that help me to breathe. It could be just in the moment, just paying attention. I need to slow down. And in that really helps me to connect not just with myself, but to pay attention to my connection with everything else around me in a different way. In fact, for victims and survivors, I really think that we need to spend a lot more time just really getting in touch with our gut, with our physical reaction to things. And that tells us that something's up, because if we breathe, if we're feeling calmer, that's where really we're going to be happier physically and emotionally and so on. So imagine, what it's like when we're healthy, happy. List what helps us, and start to think about what are the things that could be upsetting for us. Situations or dates or any number of things that we know that we start to feel uncomfortable, low energy, start to withdraw, we get that pain in our stomach. And then, when those things start to happen, we pay attention, try out some of the things on your list. See what happens with that. Whenever we're overwhelmed or starting to feel some kind of negative stuff, the best thing is to thoughtfully take some concrete action that will help us to change what's going on. And we need another list as well, because if those triggers are stronger and it feels like things that we've started already aren't working, we may need to call professionals or to take time off or do something that makes us get out of ourselves and do something more difficult or maybe even enjoyable that we normally don't think about. And as we take action, we'll find out what helps. So we really want to focus on our strengths, our vision, as well as recognize that these things are a part of us, and over time, they are different. Over time, they don't have to be so traumatic and blindside us, but they can be just parts of our day that we integrate, learn from, and can actually teach from in the future. So I invite you to check in with others, work the workbook, check in with others, and continue in this process as we become lighter.